Hi, I'm Theresa Molloy, President of the New York NIRI chapter, and welcome to the NIRI New York Minute in partnership with Business Wire. I recently had an opportunity to talk to Sarah Bowman, who's Vice President of Investor Relations at Deutsche Post DHL Group. At the 2015 IR Awards, the company won for Best Investor Relations for a European company in the U.S. market. Stay tuned to hear Sarah's tips for building an award-winning global IR program. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Pleasure.
Terrific. So, Deutsche Post DHL Group won Best IR for a European company in the U.S. in 2015. Can you tell us what makes your program an award-winning IR practice?
Well, I think it probably starts with our dedication to IR best practice to begin with. Deutsche Post DHL Group as a whole has a kind of a corporate mantra about constant process optimization, and that goes for the Investor Relations Department too. So every year we're out there looking at what are the new innovations in investor relations and how can we take those on board. And I would say that every year we probably do add one or two new things, and I think that ultimately shows in the overall IR effort because we've also won some awards also across Europe. As far as U.S. investor relations goes, I think it has to do with the dedication to the market. Obviously with the wealth of assets under management, this is not a market that you can ignore. But initially the role was filled rotationally, and then management decided that they really wanted somebody who had a very strong background with U.S. investors to actually be dedicated to the market and be here more, filling the role on a permanent basis, and that's when I came along. So I think that not only do I fill those criteria, but it really helps that I'm bilingual as well, because I've lived in Germany for a significant period of time, so that I can translate not only the language, but the culture and some of the climate in which we operate, which is very important. And of course on the other side, because as we know, I mean, IR is a two-way communications role, right? I can really credibly translate the concerns of the U.S. investors back to the management and incorporate those also into our overall IR effort.
Terrific. And how do you stay in sync with your colleagues in Germany?
Yeah, it's a challenge because we're 6 hours apart, right? I have a former sell-side background. I'm used to working with Europe. I'm used to that time difference and also to the telephone aspect of the relationship. So we're on the phone to each other every day and probably multiple times throughout their afternoon, my morning. And of course I go over there also for 2 weeks every quarter to help prepare the quarterly reports. When I started out, I was there for 5 months as a stretch, which was very important, not only from understanding the company, but also building up all of those internal relationships. Because IR is not just about the relationship you have with the C-suite, it's about the internal relationship you have with your other colleagues as well. Because you've got to gather the information from all across the organization, right? So I have to say that that foundation was also very helpful. And now, of course, on an ongoing basis, I'm working on developing global relationships because we are a global company. And the relationships I can develop here on the ground in the U.S. can be helpful to my colleagues back in Germany too.
Yes, absolutely. And there are a number of IROs who are also in your seat and are trying to manage global relationships. So, what are some of your tips to the IROs out there who are sitting in your seat right now?
Well, I think that whether you're doing either a domestic or a global IR role, it's all about presence. It's about beating the street. It's a shoe leather kind of a model. So I'm actually 45% of my time on the road. I spend about half of that in Germany, and I spend about half of that on tour in the U.S. When I was a global IR in my former company, it was pretty similar, but I spent obviously more time on the road touring around Europe. And investors are really only dealing with public information. And so one of the ways they try to differentiate themselves is in their people reading skills. So there's nothing like sitting down, looking at somebody in the eye, right? Which is why it's so important for management to get out there and see the investors. Unfortunately, I only have about 3, maybe 6 roadshow days with the C-suite in the U.S. a year. So the rest of the time, the investors just have to, make do with me.
It's you, yes.
And but I, that said, I think it's really important for me to be there and meet with them. So I try to hit all of the major investment centers every quarter, and the lesser ones I probably hit twice a year. In terms of tips for global IR, I think one of the things that's really important, again, is sort of the cultural aspect. And it's really important to understand and to know the peers of your company, if there are any, of course, in the local geography that you're meeting. So it's because the concerns of the investors that you're going to see are going to be based on the problems and the issues that those local peers are facing. So it's really important to know your peers, find out who the analysts are that are covering them, read the research, get in touch with those analysts if you need to fill yourself in on that background information, because then all of a sudden the questions from the investors are going to make sense.
Right.
So I've seen all too often European IRs come over and they talk their local story, and it's, you know, the questions and the concerns of the US investors are actually so different that they're talking at cross purposes, and they go away thinking, oh, that was a pretty good meeting, and the investor's like, well, either I'm confused or I don't think they answered my questions, and that's really not a good basis for forming an investment decision. So I think it's really important to fill yourself in on the local information before you go, wherever that may be,
Right.
whether it's coming to the US or whether you're from the US and you're going to Europe, because the way they look at the world is going to be definitely predicated on where they're sitting.
Right, and that's an excellent distinction between the U.S. perspective and the global perspective, and something that's very unique, and I'm sure that a lot of the IROs who will be watching this can benefit for your insight and your expertise.
I hope so.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. This has been terrific and very interesting. And on behalf of the NIRI New York chapter, my name is Theresa Molloy. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.